Hello, everyone. Welcome to this community forum for our Black is Beautiful project. I'd like you to give a warm welcome to this phenomenal ensemble, EXIGENCE and Dr. Eugene Rogers. Well, now you've had a little bit of a taste of what a treat we are experiencing here in the Eugene Concert Choir. We all get all teary-eyed when we start talking about it. So I have these wonderful people here up at the panel to talk with you. I've already introduced Eugene Rogers. The composer of one of the main works that we are doing, Seven Last Words of the Unarmed, is Joel Thompson here. We're doing a piece called Scenes from the Life of a Martyr by Undine Smith Moore, and that has poetry and narrative throughout, and our narrator is Marques Jerrell Ruff. And we have a new choir member who's joined the Eugene Concert Choir because the repertoire we are doing has attracted her, and that is Kajanda Love. So I'm just going to give a little bit of a recap of how this project came to be, and then we'll talk about the repertoire and some other things. So there was this amazing piece, Seven Last Words of the Unarmed. It's the last words of 7 African-American men who were killed by police or authority figures, actually published, I believe, in 2015. And it just rocked the choral world. You know, as a choral conductor, we have national meetings and regional meetings. We have communication with each other, and it was just, oh my God, have you heard this piece? It's just amazing. And so once you hear it, once you see it, it just, you know, the tears flow, and you feel like, oh, I have to do that at some point. And Joel Thompson will talk about this, but actually didn't even intend to have it as a published piece, and it's, we'll have Eugene here tell you how that all came about. But I really wanted to do the work here in our primarily white community. I needed to have some authentic voice join us in order to really express the music. And then in the shutdown of the pandemic, when the world kind of stood still for a while, it stood still at a time to watch the horror of George Floyd being murdered. And I felt that through that just as Joel needed to write this sort of musical diary about his feelings, I needed to experience this piece in order to, have that sort of connect with my feelings and how I felt in about world things and about what we wanted to express as a choir. I got in touch with Eugene Rogers. The other major portion, Scenes from the Life of a Martyr, an oratorio on the life of Martin Luther King Jr., was actually performed in Carnegie Hall in 1982. Have you ever heard of it before? I mean, I have a doctorate in music, and this is my 38th season with the concert choir. I've been in choral music for like 45 years, and I had never heard of it. Why is that? Well, I did a project called In Celebration of Women, and I traced women composers from the 12th century to the present, and was surprised to find myself how many women composers there just always were. We just don't know them. And one of them was Undine Smith Moore, just an extraordinary black female artist whose work was just marginalized, of course, because of her race and because of her gender. And so I wanted to bring that work to life. Well, when I finally got in touch with Eugene, that was really protracted. It was months of trying to get in touch with Joelle and then with Eugene, and he had this weird thing going on at the University of Michigan where his telephone went to Ronald McDonald's house.
Not by my doing. That would be a great way to avoid calls.
And I thought, at one point, my husband said, well, maybe it's one of those celebrity things where, you just go, you're Pinocchio or something, and so I let it keep ringing through until I got a nurse in some ward, and thought, no, it's really going there. And I tried everyone I could think of to get in touch with Eugene, Chorus America, ACDA, Rollo Dilworth, who was president of Chorus America, and it was actually, I had a few days left to apply for a grant to do this, and I get a call from Eugene. I'm at an airport heading out of the country, and I understand you've really been trying to get a hold of me. We just hit it off like that. When I was just going to invite the University of Michigan Men's Glee Club, which is what he used to premiere this work, and he'll tell you about that video. But then he introduced me to the Sphinx organization and his professional choir, EXIGENCE, which you just got to hear. And then, in addition to 7 Last Words, I want to do Scenes from the Life of the Martyr. He's like, oh, I love that, and we're talking about other things to put together with it. And I had kind of floated this question around to others. I'd like to call the concert Black is Beautiful. What do you think? And people were like, well, I don't know. Well, maybe you should ask someone, And so I asked Eugene, with trepidation, because I really wanted to call a concert Black is Beautiful, but if he didn't like it, no, I was going to have to change it. So I would like to call the concert Black is Beautiful. And he was like, oh, I love it. And if you have ever talked to Eugene, he has just enthusiasm that is voluminous. So it's like, yes, all my vision can come true. And then fortunately, all of these wonderful funders actually funded the project. The Hult Endowment, the Oregon Cultural Trust, and our first ever National Endowment for the Arts grant. And so they made it possible. So Eugene, if you want to add some remarks, and then let's get right to Joelle and hear about 7 Last Words.
Sure. First of all, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to this forum, and I'm just so grateful for Diane and her vision. She's correct. Immediately when we began to meet each other on the phone, I knew that her heart was in the right place. Yes, of course, you have to have money. Without money, you can't do things, but that's not why she wanted to do this. And that for me was important, is that I knew that she believed in the music and what it could do for this community and our lives together as a coming together. And so that for me is what made it also hearing your, and not only your enthusiasm, but your genuine love and care for this and what needed to happen, not just a performance, but the education, how we can work with the community. And we worked with the high schoolers and University of Oregon and the whole gamut. And so for us, whenever I get the chance to perform Joelle's work, I count it an honor and a privilege. Joelle, when I met Joelle, he was just right out of undergraduate, is that correct? Or master's, just out of his master's degree. You know, I got this amazing score and then personally connected to it, but thought, gosh, how can I bring this to the fore and to the public without people believing that I had an agenda of any type? And so I had to work through my own feelings and couldn't, you know how you have something in your life and you just can't put it away. You put it away, you come back to it. And it was this piece and finally getting the chance to get to know Joelle that I knew I had to perform it, and hopefully he would allow us to do that. And so our relationship began really through that, and we've been on this journey together and have received. For us, there was no. I know for me, he never intended to be performed. I only had the idea of I want to share this with my students, and it really has taken on really a life of its own. And of course, Joelle will talk more about that. And so we're just honored to be here and to share this music with this community as well as the Eugene Concert Choir. So I'll leave it there until we can get to some more specific questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. Seven Last Words of the Unarmed, I wrote sort of straddling 2 years, 2014 into 2015. The Staten Island grand jury in November chose not to indict the officer who murdered Eric Garner. And that decision broke me, but was also the emotional impetus for this piece, which for me, I've described it as a diary entry, a way for me to process these very difficult emotions, dealing with the intersection of my identity with this scourge of police brutality. I made a list of the 7 last words of Christ in the liturgy that it's traditionally performed in Christendom, and then in another column used Shirin Barghi's journalistic work. She created a pictogram series that was prevalently on Twitter at the time, and she would pair the simple image of a bird in flight or a light bulb or a tangle of knots with the last words of an unarmed black person that was killed. And it was called the hashtag Last Words Project. And so borrowing from her work, I chose last words that fit with the liturgy in the order that it's presented. So for example, in the liturgy, the third saying is Jesus on the cross talking to Mary, his mother, saying, "Woman, this is thy son, son, this is thy mother," talking about his beloved disciple John, "Take care of each other while I'm gone." And in the third movement of 7 Last Words of the Unarmed, there's Amadou Diallo's words that he left on a voicemail to his mom in the African country of Guinea: "Mom, I'm going to college." He had saved up enough money, washing dishes in New York, wanting to pursue a bachelor's of computer science, but unfortunately he was mistakenly profiled by 4 plainclothes police officers of the NYPD. He mistakenly pulled out his wallet, and one of the officers tripped on the way to see his ID. The other 3 thought that he had been shot at. They shot at him 41 times, 19 bullets hit him. So there's a lot of heaviness with each of these stories. Each of these lives are fully human. A lot of times, in order to justify their deaths and rationalize it away, media portrayals of these men found the worst things they possibly could have done in order to justify it. And seeing all of this rhetoric on the media, I was losing sense of my own humanity, and this composition was a way for me to hold on to my own identity and my own self-worth in the wake of dealing with all of this tragedy. So when I wrote the piece in about a span of a little bit more than 2 weeks, I put it away. I felt sort of exorcised of the feelings that I had that had started the piece, but then Freddie Gray was killed in Baltimore the following April. And so I put a call out on Facebook maybe the next month in May of 2015, asking people if they wanted to sight read this work that I wrote the previous winter. I held a little reading session. A mutual friend of ours contacted Dr. Rogers with my permission and said, would you mind if I sent him the score? He looked at the score. I remember when we first met, it's like, your personality isn't matched. the intensity of this music. But I think that's I think the piece sort of is a way for me to sort of bottle that up, you know, and so I can still be myself. But yes, this piece came to life truly with Dr. Rogers and his belief in the music and its value and what it can do for communities that choose to engage with it. And I'm so very grateful for his friendship and his mentorship and guidance in bringing this to life. And there was an immediate trust that I knew that I could take this very potent sort of kernel of some essential part of who I am in musical form and give it to his hands and know that it will be treated safely and with respect. Yeah, so I think that's all for now.
So Marques is in EXIGENCE, and they have performed 7 Last Words as well, and he's, of course, also, as I said, the narrator in Scenes from the Life of a Martyr. And so, Marques, would you like to comment just first on experiencing 7 Last Words?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm really grateful for this opportunity. I also would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge my colleague and friend, Stephen Berlanga, who I first performed with several years ago, who told me about EXIGENCE and was the portal for me to get connected to Dr. Rogers and now be here. So thank you, Stephen. I appreciate you tremendously because this has been truly a life-changing experience being a part of this group. Across the choral landscape in America, while there are very successful groups, many of those groups do not look like me. And they don't really reflect the overall composition of America. And so while it is I'm grateful for the opportunity to participate with them, to collaborate with them, there's a certain element sometimes of tokenism within these ensembles. But here in EXIGENCE, I feel at home. And I feel my very first performance with this ensemble a year ago, I said, oh, this is what I've been waiting for. And so I'm very grateful for this. This opportunity to perform this work is one of those experiences that will stick with me throughout my life and continue to inform the decisions that I make as I try to impact this world and leave this world better than how I found it. Truthfully, the caricature and demonization of Black people is woven into the fabric of America and has been there from the outset. And so it is very easy for us to look at Black people in one light and then quickly flip the narrative in a second to angry Black woman or angry Black man, or I felt threatened by them. And what we have seen in this work is how, for example, in Movement 3, a young man who came here to this country, did it right, worked hard, got a job, and saved money to go to college, but was profiled. And then immediately went from a hardworking person who was trying to pull themselves up by the very bootstraps that this country seems to be so proud of, yet doesn't supply boots for many of the people who need them. He found himself a statistic. So when we sing these words, for me as a singer going through this, sometimes it's very hard to not become very emotional. Even hearing Joelle talk just now, I had to really check myself. But because I am still here, and I recognize how quickly I could not be. I recognize how quickly my face could be on a t-shirt, or it could be #Justice for Marques. Whenever I come to this piece, especially, I feel as though I have to be an ambassador for these men and more who are not named, who are not here to tell their story. And so it fills me with great pride to be able to do that.
So as I said, Kajanda was attracted to become a member of the Eugene Concert Choir because of this repertoire. And if you haven't seen it, there's a very nice video that the Hult Center made about this work. And Kajanda spoke to it so beautifully and about the importance to her of singing these words. I just wanted her to talk about this attraction to join us on this repertoire and what it feels like to be singing this.
Thanks, Diane. I feel so grateful to be a part of this, and there are a few reasons. First, I don't think things just happen by coincidence. The only reason I've heard of this actual performance is because I was sitting in a restaurant waiting to be seated, and I met 𝘓𝘦𝘢𝘕, who's a part of the concert choir. And we just happened to strike up a conversation. She was with a few other people and then asked me to join them. And then she was so excited because she had just finished a performance. And she was telling me about the concert and about Black is Beautiful. And she's like, you should join us. We don't have any women of color in the concert choir, and I think you'd be great at it. And being a mom of 3, I have 2 African-American sons. And you know, when they go out, it's not just them going out. You're fearful. And so to be able to perform with this choir, and I should also mention 2 of my children performed in concert choir, so I was the mom that drove them around. To be on stage is just something I'm doing also in support of them as well, because they love music and I want to be a part of it. I want to be a part of something that is actually educating the public and touching people in such a way that it changes their heart. You know, in every aspect, war or when people are doing something great, even football games, they use music. They use music to inspire and to move people, right? This is a piece that I hope will inspire and move people to change. If not change, just to start a conversation. Because, you know, as a mom, you shouldn't be in fear of your children just going out, just walking out of the house or traveling. So I want to be a part of the movement, and I want to be that difference maker. And Diane has given me the opportunity to do that. And I know some of the choir members look at me because I'm always smiling and gushing because I can't believe I'm here. I'm so excited.
So Eugene is conducting this work, and he, of course, has conducted it numerous times and just brings a real depth to the interpretation. We are also having EXIGENCE, the group that you just heard, sing a set of their own. And you could talk a little bit about the repertoire that they will bring to that.
Sure. EXIGENCE will begin with a set of 3 songs. Because the concert is focused on Black music and Black issues, we are performing 3 pieces by 3 different Black composers. The first one is The Hymn. It's a new work by Stacey Gibbs. Stacey Gibbs is a composer from the Detroit area, and wrote a piece basically that brings in the Battle Hymn of the Republic combined with Lift Every Voice and Sing, and deals with really the sort of the juxtaposition of what we hold on to so much as a country of America, but also we think about the Black national anthem and how, similar to this topic today, how true have we been to that? Does that really mean for the Battle Hymn of the Republic for every person? And it really starts off with a very poignant phrase that says, "My country, 'tis of thee, you've not been good to me." And it goes from there. It's very powerful. He says it's his most pointed piece about some of these topics. But he ends with, "Let's live in harmony in unity. Let's come together where we're all seeing every person as one, as humans. That will be followed by Detroit's own Dr. Augustus Hill's arrangement of Fix Me Jesus. Augustus Hill was for many years the assistant conductor of the 𝘓𝘢𝘬𝘥𝘬 Chorale, which was really, we call the 𝘓𝘢𝘬𝘥𝘬 Chorale sort of our part of our legacy, because they were part of their legacy, I should say, because they were one of the first African-American community adult groups in that city who toured all around the country singing spirituals. And so Sphinx is headquartered in Detroit. We feel a connection to that organization. And so whenever we can sort of pay homage to 𝘓𝘢𝘬𝘥𝘬, we do that. And it's an amazing arrangement of that spiritual, Fix Me Jesus. And that'll be followed by a masterpiece that Joel wrote for EXIGENCE, our very first year, the 𝘚𝘰𝘮𝘄 Sings for Freedom, that uses the Maya Angelou text that's written for piano, clarinet, and mezzo-soprano soloists. And it is truly a masterpiece that takes us on a whole journey, and the constant idea about this cage bird versus the free bird, and harmonically you hear the difference and the joy, and then how this cage bird, the use of the clarinet is this bird, and they get a little freedom, and then they get brought back down, and you hear Juan Esteban as our guest clarinetist for that work. So that's our set that to me speaks about different ideas that are all connected to the second half of the concert as well.
And in that second half of the concert, that's when we're doing scenes from the life of a martyr. And I was struck by Joel's description of in Seven Last Words, how he's bringing out the humanity of Christ. Saying things like, I'm thirsty, which any human, any person would say. And here we're going through the scenes of the life of a martyr, and each scene is like, there's birth with cradle songs, there's this playful childhood, there's him as a young man and falling in love, and a love duet between basically him and 𝘓𝘬𝘳. And then he's called to service and to preach, and the reaction of the world, that is how many of you that hate me. We have the death, dramatic scene, but it doesn't end as a dirge. It ends with this beautifully spiritually uplifting, tell all my Father's people, don't you grieve for me, and a grand alleluia. And Eugene had said to me about following Seven Last Words with glory, that he didn't want this concert to be just a lament for those we've lost, but a call to action. And I think in both halves of the concert, it turns from that into the call to action. And Marques is narrating the words of the scenes. Would you like to say a couple of things about that narration?
Undine Smith-Moore has done a masterful job of compiling both original text and then poetry of other authors and placed them throughout this oratorio in such a deliberate manner. What I love that Diane says is that it humanizing Dr. King. And when we think about Dr. King, it's very easy for us to consider the man that we honor on, January 15th. But then historically, we have to remember that at the time of his death, he wasn't largely popular, that many people thought his ideas were controversial. And so now, all this time later, we use these quotes, and sometimes we misuse these quotes, but we use his quotes as agents of peace. But really, this was a complex human being. But at the core, and what I love that she says in the text, was that he was a person who made bold choices. He was a person who spoke. And I hope that in this world today, especially with the hypersensitivity around our words as it needs to be, because we need to be accountable for the things that we say, but I hope that this might inspire someone when they leave the concert on Sunday to speak and to make bold choices. But more importantly, to realize that if you make a bold choice and it's the wrong choice, to fix that choice, to come back and say, I can change from that, because that is a part of the human condition, is being able to evolve to say, I may have thought this then, but I've learned something now, and now I think this. And that is what I hope people leave our concert with on Sunday.
So I'm going to bring the microphone out towards the audience. We would love to open things up to questions. So if you would like to ask a question, please come up to the microphone to say, we are videoing this presentation so that others can hear it later. And so it's just helpful to get the questions also so people hear them, as opposed to, just the answers. So if anyone has a question you would like to ask, please come up and ask.
Conan, representing Vancouver, Washington. I'm actually from the East Coast. Not really a question, just a comment. I just want to commend you all for what you are doing, is basically advocating for social justice through the arts. And I love the fact that you all are providing the narrative along with it, that this is more than a performative concert. The whole idea is to educate and promote social justice and how everyone in this room can fight the fight that we need. So I just want to thank you all for doing that. Diane, personally, I want to thank you for having the courage to do this. There's not many allies that would go out on a limb to do something like this, and also having the courage to make mistakes, right? Even to say, I want to name the concert Black is Beautiful, and being unsure, you had the courage to go through, and also having the forward thinking to make sure it's an authentic experience. Like, that's the last thing. And brother, you talked about this very eloquently. There's a lot of performative stuff that's out here. Performance is just for show. This is a call to action, and I look so forward to this concert tomorrow. So thank you all for coming out.
Can I say something? So I just want to kind of parlay onto what you said. I have to say that as I joined the Eugene Concert Choir, it wasn't just a performance for Diane. Between every song and section, she explained the people that were actually a part of this song, why the song was written, and the feelings behind the song. And she encouraged us to do our own background study on the music. And so it was educational. She had such feeling for it, and that feeling was given out and portrayed and kind of evaded throughout the room every time we rehearsed. So this is not just about performance. She wants to see change occur, and she is being that person that is inspiring the change in all of us.
I have had the chance to work with many choirs on this music, and I can always tell by the way they are prepared immediately when I give the first downbeat. And it was very clear that it was an organic process with this choir. They were completely invested. You could see it in their eyes. They were singing those words as if they were their own. And that is not something that just happens because you're reading through the notes. That is an organic process. It's encouraged, it's through talking, it's all of the above. And that I'm commending you, Diane, for that preparation. That's fantastic.
Yes. Okay.
I also have to commend Diane as well, because that truth about knowing that the choir has done the work, you can hear it immediately. And unfortunately, one of the things I have to contend with as a composer, letting this piece out into the world, is that sometimes this piece can be wielded in an incompetent way that causes harm. I had the honor and privilege of sitting next to Amadou Diallo's mom, Kajanda Diallo, at the premiere of the orchestrated version that Eugene masterfully conducted in 2017, and we held hands and wept. And I always remember, what she whispered in my ear, and how we experienced that together. And so unfortunately, though, that I've known that there are performances in which I would be ashamed to have Kajanda Diallo. Just to be frank, there because people are just performing the work to check a box or to, it actually does so much more harm than not even doing the work itself. But to come to a place, even though it's, 0.9% black, as you mentioned in your before, like to come to a place, but knowing that the choir has done the work, that they know the names of the men, that they know the words, what happened leading up to the moment that these words were uttered. It does my heart a wonderful good, and I wish that 𝘚𝘦𝘷𝘦𝘢𝘕 could be here so that she could see that the words of her son are still in line with the mission of her foundation, the 𝘠𝘦𝘷𝘦𝘢𝘕 Foundation. It's still trying to provide pathways to higher education for students of color. So yes, thank you, Diane, really, for all the work that you've done to make this happen.
This is just so amazing to hear, the composer just speak to me this way. It's like, I'm Joelle Thompson is coming to you, Gene. It's just, and the more you live in the work, the more it's beautiful from the first time you hear it, but the more you hear it, it's like it travels within you so much that the beauty just constantly expands. There's one where the text is, it's not real. Well, immediately when you start singing it, you are like going into this unreality state, and you can feel that's where the music is. What the actual words meant was, this is not a real gun. He was in Walmart buying a BB gun for his son. And so Joelle brilliantly takes this, the ordinary words of it's not real, and it just takes it into an ethereal, otherworldly unreality that totally fulfills the whole expression of it. So we're growing so much, the more we sing it, we're growing so much. Again, I want to ask if anyone would like to ask a question. I invite you to please come on up. Yes, Karen. Karen Stingel is one of our concert choir members. You can pull that down.
Well, I don't exactly have a question, but I'm so grateful that this is happening. I grew up in and out of Washington, D.C., so I was right in the thick of, I was singing We Shall Overcome, and I still get the chills when I sing it. And it still blows me away that it's still taking this long to get to this point. But everything like this helps us toward that, and I'm so thankful. And when I moved here, I felt so at home because I was a hippie, so I felt excluded from some places. but then I started going, God, it's so white here. And I'd go back to D.C. and ride the D.C. Transit and go, this feels normal to me. And now it's been really reassuring that there have been more and more black people moving here. I see a lot more than I used to, and I feel like we're becoming more normal. And so this was not just a showpiece or whatever. I mean, we really need this here, and I'm so thankful that it's happening here. Thank you
Karen.
for your music and your talents.
Mm-hmm. Yes, when we first moved here, the slogan people would like to say is celebrate diversity here in our community. And there are a lot of diverse different mindsets in this area, and if you ever want to step back into the 60s, come to the Oregon Country Fair. And you'll have more tie-dye than you can ever possibly deal with. And I remember when our son was quite little, and he was in like second grade or something, and they were talking about no touch and respecting people's space and all of this kind of thing. And then we go to the Oregon Country Fair, and there are these bare-boobed women going around, parading around everywhere and everything. It's like, yes, this is diversity here. But I'm originally from the Chicago area, that's just southwest of Chicago, Joliet, which is known for its state penitentiary. If you ever saw the movie The Blues Brothers, Joliet Jake, that was John Belushi, just fresh out of Joliet State Penitentiary, and much more of an integrated area. My father was my choral director. He was the choral director at the high school. When we first moved there, there was one big, gigantic high school, 4 stories high, and an entire block. It was 4,000 students. And it was about maybe 40% black. And my father had a great choir, and he would often feature one of his best students. He had this terrific black baritone he would feature in solos and everything. And it was just a very comfortable situation. And I think, we had this marvelous speaker whose name is escaping me at the moment, talk with our board, who speaks about race relations and, just and how to present this work and so on. And he was really saying about everyone has their own context. They all have their own context. And he was quite gentle about it. And thinking about my context, I would go to my mother's house, where my mother grew up in Akron, Ohio, from the time I was born all the way, every vacation, every holiday, everything. And the little town we lived in at the time was pretty white. But when we would go to Akron, my great aunt had a general store, the only white person at this general store in the entire black district. And so I was in more of an immersive context. It's, it was surprising to me moving here how many people, when we would start talking about this project, they would say, where I grew up out here, I did not even see a black person face to face until I was 12 years old, or till I went to college or something. When I first came here, I had to watch Arsenio Hall every night just to see a black person, and but it's so interesting that this particular community is so accepting, and they want to do the right thing, and they want to bring unity, and we're welcoming more and more. We just don't have the context of the population yet. Maybe we can bring in some more of this population to our area. Eugene, the Sphinx organization has been very successful at, there was this wonderful quote by Aaron Dworkin, who founded it, who said that he had tried to get Black and Latinx performers accepted by performing organizations, and he would be met with, well, then we'd have to lower our standards. And with the Sphinx organization and what they have done, I'm sorry, the standard we saw out here singing at us, it doesn't get higher than that. It's a privilege to have them here. Do you want to talk a bit about how Sphinx
Sure.
made this all work and
Sure.
their vision?
25 years ago, Aaron Dworkin, who's a dear friend now, just had a vision of, Sphinx started as a predominantly orchestral organization, and Aaron was a violinist who said, you know, I'm tired of going to orchestra concerts and I don't see anybody on stage that really looks like America. And he, as a college student at the University of Michigan, went to the dean actually and said, I'd like to start an organization that has a competition so that we can begin to sort of highlight talented artists, string players of diversity. And the dean at that time gave him, I think, like $5,000. I mean, that's huge, because he said, young man, I don't know if this is going to work, but you have a lot of passion, so I'm going to support your dream. And that is when he began the Sphinx organization. And it first came about through gathering of musicians from around the nation who were leading orchestral players from various orchestras around the nation to just come together, a convening of that. And then through that, a competition where they would give prizes to string players through competition who were of color. And 25 years later, I mean, it is really the leading arts diversity organization in this nation. And I think about all of the artists who have grown out of that. 𝘚𝘦𝘢𝘥𝘚 Orchestra that's in England now also celebrates diversity in strings, and they tell you that they were inspired by the Sphinx organization. EXIGENCE, we were inspired by the Sphinx organization. I was fortunate enough to win the Medal of Excellence Award, and with that award, you're given money to sort of begin projects. And I knew that when I looked around in America to see all of these amazing professional choirs, there still weren't many of them that had, like the professional orchestras, very few singers of color in those ensembles. It definitely is not because of lack of talent. So I thought, well, let's take a moment and see what we could produce being inspired by Sphinx. I just asked them to write a letter of support. And they came back to me and said, we'd like to do better than that. We'd like to partner with you. And they, at that time, then took on EXIGENCE. And we named the group together. And in 2018, EXIGENCE was born and had auditions around the nation and online. And 5 years later, we're still going strong. And our mission is simply that, to promote more professional singers of Black and Latinx origin who can hopefully build their careers more as soloists, more as choral scholars. But in addition, as we have conductors in the group, we've got composers, because we also want to champion repertoire that often is not on the concert stage, to highlight composers and stories that maybe some people can't relate to, but there are others who can relate to. We've had so many people say, well, we don't have diversity on our board or donors or our audience. And well, can they see themselves in those stories? Can they see themselves on that stage? And so that's what we're all about in terms of trying to promote that, so everyone can be connected to classical music. I don't think classical music should just be for a few. It should be for all of us. And so EXIGENCE is about promoting that repertoire and those artists and those stories.
Yes.
This experience for me is really, I can't tell you, it's so unique. Because at the age of 17, I was performing with a professional choir called the Jubilee Singers, Jubilee Singers, who have appeared in concert right in here in Eugene, Oregon at the Hult Center. And 𝘚𝘦𝘢𝘿, who died in January, we held a ceremony, was director of the Jubilee Singers as well as professor of music at University of California at Davis. Very involved with American Choral Directors Association, and I, at the age of 17, 16, was doing my first professional tour, signing autographs, doing the whole thing, thought about all that. And in those times, I had a chance to really try to understand why this music was so well accepted. It was, and we were largely doing spirituals. And if you know anything about spirituals, they don't always mean what they say, so to speak. If it's a happy song, we're probably singing about something sad, and in reverse. And so to do that and to be in Europe where people had, you're talking about not seeing Black people here, in Europe where people are taking pictures of you because they've not seen pictures of you, people in person. To do that and to go through that experience and go through it and live through it and grow through it, and to realize what I needed to do for myself. Well, if you don't know, and you wouldn't, I decided I would indeed finish my doctorate degree and became professor of music at California University at Northridge for 26 years, where I just retired. My group was performed at ACA Nationals. My group has won international competitions, that whole thing. But that's really not important. It was the opportunity that I got and the understanding and realization that I'm still now the only African-American conductor on the West Coast at a major institution teaching. And so it's amazing. But to connect with this, why am I here? Because Eugene Rogers, I connected with him when he was 20 years old. We were performing at the University of Illinois, and I was conducting the World Youth Choir, and I was concerned that there were not going to be any African Americans in the group, and he was our host, making sure we were okay. And I said, "Do you sight read?" He said, "Yes." I said, I said, "Well, let's go into practice room." We went to practice room. I auditioned him on the spot and accepted him on the spot and said, "Did you get your information in? Send it in, and let's get you there that summer for that session." And he was there. And from that moment on, we have been connected. And I should tell you, so connected that I am here as his guest this weekend. And he wanted to bring me in and be a part of it. And for every one of the things that he has encountered as an experience in his growth and walk, he's called me and said, I'm da-da-da-da-da, what do you think? And he's been religious about making sure that I was included, and my input was included in his decision making. I feel, as I watch this group, what is unique about it is that the Jubilee Singers had a message as well, but there were some things we could not say or would not say. And today we're at least at a place where we might be able to say it. So for people who tell you there's no growth happening, that we're at the same place we were, that is not true. That is absolutely not true. Are we moving fast enough? Probably not. But the fact that we can sing or have an adaptation to a song, My Country 'Tis of Thee, You've Not Been Good to Me, would not have been able to be said 20 years ago. And accept it and realize for what what the message was. And so I'm thinking that perhaps the fear that we were facing and the racism that was going on today is because when you corner someone and they're starting to realize, they turn around, they lash out, and they come back at you, and maybe we're closer than we think, perhaps. That what we're hearing this rhetoric today that the racism is as bad as it's ever been, that is not true. Obviously not true. What we are hearing today is that there are some people who are fearful that maybe we're going too close together, and our realization that we are all human and we share some of the same motivations in our lives. And so maybe that's really the story today, is that we're closer than we think, and that the people who are lashing out and calling it racism as though there's been no growth, no movement towards the center, are really fearful that they're losing control of that idea that we can be separate from this. We are sharing a lot, the music, and I love the idea that we are, it's a diverse representation as singers racially, ethnically, but we are living here, and how could we not grow if we're around each other and we're intelligent? How could we not take in something from somewhere else and understand it and try to understand it? So the idea that we don't want to understand it, I don't think is true. But more importantly, is that we are still accepting the dialogue. And this group in front of us today, I watch them and think back to Jubilee Singers and think back to their message. I should say, as I talked with them in yesterday evening, these are educated people, which is what we said was a way to advance in this country. And I'm taking my brother right here. You clap twice, but do you know he's finishing up his PhD, and that he's writing his dissertation, and that he's seeking jobs around the nation, which will be difficult to get because they still are for anyone, and still as an African American man, where the committees decide who they hire, not made up of black people, he will have a difficult time. Do you sense from hearing him talk that he should have a difficult time? Not at all. I mean, he should be a forerunner. So my point, I listened to a very quiet, he's saying non-assuming, but don't, as he said, don't let that fool you. The composer, would you have a difficult time thinking of him as a militant in his dialogue and what he's writing? Would you see him as a militant in meeting him? No, he's simply sharing his feelings and the music, and it comes on his expression. And I could go, and a mother, of course, my mother raised 2 sons by herself, and interesting enough, when at one point in my life where she decided she did not like the junior high school I was in because this was going to be a problem for him, she figured out a way to move us even though where she wanted to move us, they were not accepting black families, a single black, but she figured out a way, and that made a difference in my life, I know it. So I understand exactly your sons and the fear that you must face in their going out. And that is sad. But I would express this. There's probably fear in a lot of parents as well. And so I don't want to imply that only black parents have fear, and I'm sure that's not what you meant. White parents have fears as well. But we've had them much too long. You know, and that's what we're talking about now. It'd be nice to not have that as the ongoing idea of being a parent. But I'm just so grateful to you for this experience as a person who performed here at the Jubilee Singers. And were we a novelty? I don't know. But I will tell you, they were all professional singers. We all received a paycheck for doing what we were doing as well. But the idea that we're continuing along, and Eugene has found that as a part of his mission. And I will tell you, University of Michigan, as prestigious as it is for him as a professor, it's not easy. He goes through his own battles each and every day. And I'm just grateful for the notion that he's going forward. I'm grateful to him as a person that I love and respect, and I'm just delighted to see his going forward. And the singers who are with him, they're just as special. I met with them, and they're just as special. And I congratulate you for this effort. You know, it's not an easy one. You are indeed a treasure yourself for bringing this to this community. And for the community, you are special because you are so accepting of this as an experience that everyone should have, not just an isolated few. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Dr. Paul Smith, everyone.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jessica. I'm part of the choir here. And I got hold of this book, The New Jim Crow, and I put the note out to you guys. I wanted to know a little bit more. I am a white person. I am so ignorant of the black experience. It's just appalling. But yes, this talks about the war on drugs and the effect it has had on the black community. And that we are spending $87 billion a year on militarization of the police and making jails. And that has changed the nature of the police force. There's a lot of Rambos out there now that are well-funded. And so my question is, I feel that taking your piece to my soul is going to be of benefit to me. But I also need to think that I can do something on a political level, on the social level, and I'd like to have some suggestions from you as what we, as white people, can actually go out and do. And the next question I have is, I was in a black gospel, a white gospel choir, an interfaith choir, and loved it. We were so white, it's amazing. We had a handful of black people that loved singing with us. There was a professional singer who tried to teach us how to do things, you know, how to sing gospel the way black people do it. We were amazingly unreceptive to that. And when I went up to her one time and said, well, what's it like to be a black person in a white gospel choir? And she said, oh, it's just fine, you know, and I thought, oh, okay. Is there a little bit more backstory on this that you guys could educate us to? Thank you.
Just so you understand, not all black people sing gospel, and not all of them, absolutely, and not all of them accept gospel music as a form of expression. You know, even in the black church, some black churches do not, gospel, you know, so it's a really interesting issue, just so you know. Okay. It's bigger than just.
Yes, please.
So thank you for those questions. They are incredibly thought-provoking, as they should be. And of course, I always like to preface these sorts of responses with, while I am a scholar on music and specific music ideas, like for example, my dissertation will be on the use of the Negro spiritual at predominantly white institutions. And what does that represent? Is it 21st century modern day blackface minstrelsy, or is it cultural appropriation, or is it appreciation? These things will be done in 2024, so you can read it at that point. But I'm actually going to go at your first question there, because that book, The New Jim Crow, which I'm very familiar with, there's a part of our American history that gets glossed over a lot, which is that post-Emancipation Proclamation, particularly at the outset of the 20th century, there were these laws called black codes that existed in the South. And so and this predates even Jim Crow, right? And so these black codes were codes of decorum of what black folks could and could not do. They included things like not voting and voter intimidation, et cetera. And then Jim Crow comes along and but if we go back even before then, when we look at the 13th Amendment, for example, which if you've not seen that documentary, 13th, by Ava DuVernay, it's a very, very good documentary that I encourage you to check out, which continues to enforce this idea that there is a hierarchy amongst human beings. And perhaps in some instances, a hierarchy is necessary. For example, I'm not a part of the 1%. I would imagine that being a part of the 1% might be a very nice existence to have that kind of money. I hope to one day know that, but I'm not a part of that. So I'm not saying that hierarchy is a bad thing, but what I am saying is that when hierarchy is determined based on the color of someone's skin, and we value a human being based off of what they look like or what we think they should be. So, for example, when I say to someone, I'm a musician, and they say, oh, do you rap? And I say, no, but I sing 𝘠𝘦𝘢𝘍𝑒𝘍 de la causa from the Marriage of Figaro, if you'd like to hear that. My Mozart, my 5 arias are absolutely stunning. And they're good arias. And so they were well written. Mozart's really good. He writes well. I'm waiting for Joel to write me an aria next. That'll be next. But we have to ask the question. We have to, and these conversations here that we have, these concerts that we put on, are not our way of saying this is the way, because none of us know what the way is. The question of authenticity is not a real question. The real question is why? And sometimes that ambiguity makes us uncomfortable because we would like a recipe or a prescription going forward for how we deal with these things, but that's not the case always. But to begin to embrace the ambiguity of why. Why are these systems becoming in place? Why are we electing officials that make it illegal to have souls to the polls, which we know are one of the main avenues to get black voters to the poll? That's Georgia for you, just so you know. Why are they making it illegal to pass out water and snacks to folks standing in a long line waiting to vote? These are the questions that we need to ask. And if we're looking for things that we can do, number one is that our voting needs to reflect our values. And oftentimes, and this is dangerous water here, but I'm going to go there anyway because I feel very safe to say this. Oftentimes, we find ourselves isolated on a single issue around a politician. And so if they identify with that single issue, it's like, this is the way I'm going, and the rest of the stuff we can just deal with. But for my ancestors, our ancestors, who fought and died just to cast a vote, to suppress that or intimidate that in any way, or to try to keep us from the polls, I just can't allow myself in the state that I live in, which when I say where I live, you're going to be like, what are you doing? Because I live in Florida currently. I know. Oh, but how are we voting? What are we, and then asking yourself this, and this is the last thing I'll say on this. After the Great Awakening in 2020 with the murder of George Floyd, we saw this influx of volunteerism and action. People changed their profile pictures to black so that they could have Blackout Tuesday. And we see Juneteenth celebrations. Walmart has found a way to commercialize it now. You can go buy napkins and plates to celebrate Juneteenth. But what have we done since 2020? What have these arts organizations in your area done since 2020? It was very popular to do black music then because we stand together. But what about now? Have they returned back to the same programs? And so the question I ask is why, and then what are we still doing? Are we still volunteering? Are we still putting our money in places? Are we still reading and educating ourselves? And most importantly, are we still voting our beliefs to ensure that all Americans, regardless of who you are or what you look like, have access and equity at the polls?
Love that. I just want to add that as a former police officer and as a former assistant warden of a female prison, I think that the best way to address those issues, as you were saying, are through the laws. And it's it's not just about the elected officials, because sometimes their hands are tied, but about those people who, the judges. You have to do that. We have to start looking forward, looking ahead, and actually making an impact on those people who are actually writing those laws and bringing them forward, because there's a thing called structural racism, and we know that. That's what the Jim Crow book is all about. That's what happened after slavery was abolished. Then we just put into laws, and then those people enforcing the laws, like regular police officers, they're just abiding by those things, those rules that they have to enforce, but they're not enforced the same way, right? We see an overabundance of African American people in jails and prisons, and they have, actually maybe not even done anything wrong, but because it was implied, they're immediately taken to jail and then eventually prison, and they could be innocent. And so I just see, especially as an assistant warden, I saw inside the prison. I was an African American that worked as an assistant warden, but those people under me were mostly Caucasian. And so some of the individuals in custody, as that's what they're called now, were, if they committed an infraction in prison, some of them, when they go through their hearing, they would be let off, and then others were actually punished and put into confinement. So it was a disproportional amount of people who were African American placed in confinement. I was over that area, and when I'd walk through that area and see all these African American women in confinement, when they had not done anything other than defend themselves sometimes, and I felt like, well, what's going on? It's because there is this thing called structural racism, and people tend to take a blind eye at it. And until we start changing the laws and applying the laws the same across the board, things will not change. So then it is up to us, not only to start with the laws, the politicians that we put into place, but it continues to move upward. And speaking, we have power, but only as together, collectively.
Thank you, Kajanda. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, I have a comment on your question, what are arts organizations doing now? I'm from New York City, which is full of choruses and well-meaning activist people. Almost every chorus is doing the collected works of Langston Hughes. And, great poet, great poetry, but not current, right? Few exceptions. Last summer, Marques Jerrell, beautiful, stunning, shocking, horrifying piece on Tulsa was performed at Carnegie Hall. And for so many of us in the audience, I think it was like, Tulsa race massacre, what? Not in our friggin' history books, And we went to good schools in good communities. And it's just like, why do we not even know about this? So hugely educational. This summer, Adolphus Hailstork, A Knee on the Neck, is being done by New York choral artists. And that will also be an educational moment. So I think, but nobody's doing anything like this program or the 4-day lead up to this program with these things. So I think this is a powerful example of what can be done and the effect it can have. And my side question is, I know you said you're an ambassador, and I know you said you sat with Amadou Diallo's mother, but I still do not see, and I know you wrote the arrangement which is allowing this to be performed. I still do not see how you can perform it without just being so angry every time and in such pain. And I admire your ability to do it, but I'm just astonished that you can pull it off. So thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Sally Hoskins. Yes. Joelle?
One of my favorite artists that I turn to for solace, especially after these countless deaths, is James Baldwin. And I've written a piece called To Awaken the Sleeper, based on his text, mainly from his 1971 book, No Name in the Street, specifically the second essay in it, To Be Baptized, where he does a wonderful analysis of the state of power and the interaction between the elite and the marginalized in our society. But he's probably most famous for a quote that, a paraphrase of, to be black in this country is to be angry almost all the time. We definitely do hold that anger, and it is very difficult for me to listen to the piece. It's very difficult for me to perform the piece. I do perform it only with Eugene, though, because I feel safe in his hands. He understands the rage that I hold in my soul, and this is an outlet to finally express it. To express that rage in reality could lead to me being a hashtag. So this is like a safe space for me to let it out, and I'm grateful for that. But I also want to return to what Baldwin said. The thing that gives me so much solace is that, yes, he contained a lot of rage and expressed a lot of rage in his lifetime, but he also had what I feel is an impossible love of this country, at least the possibility of this country. It killed his friends, Medgar Evers, MLK, X. The fact that he was friends with all of them, regardless of their differing political sort of ideologies, is a testament to his charisma and his ability to connect. But he had this love of this country, and I think everything that I've written since Seven Last Words of the Unarmed is an attempt to hold both the rage and the impossible love of the possibility of this country. Langston Hughes, as you brought up, wrote America Will Be, the Make America America Again, which is very similar to a very different phrase. But he in that poem, he says, for all the songs we've sung, for all the dreams we've dreamed, America was never America to me. And yet I swear America will be. And James Baldwin, in one of the last speeches that he gave in 1986 at the National Press Club, said, "We are living in a world in which everybody and everything is interdependent. It is not white, this world. It's not black either. But the future of this world depends on everyone in this room. And that future depends on to what extent and by what means we liberate ourselves from a vocabulary which now cannot bear the weight of reality." And that, I have his words just like tattooed on my heart, because I believe in that possibility of that America will be in the vein of Langston Hughes. And I also believe in this interdependent world that is possible here in Eugene and here in, all across the country. I have to believe in it, otherwise I can't create. This hope has to be the wellspring from which the music happens, and I'm so grateful to have music as a sort of field where I can cultivate an imagination so that I can help us all imagine what that America can be and inspire us all to action. And so I'm so grateful, again, I just have to say, for this opportunity.
Well, I think with these words, I don't want to add anything to them. They're just so profound and so beautiful. So Joelle, thank you. I am honored to have everyone up here on the panel with us. I'm so glad that many of you came here to just learn more with your open hearts and to just live through this whole experience. This has been a bonding experience for all of us, in ways that I couldn't even anticipate. So I'm just honored and thrilled that we could put this together, that we could have this conversation. It will certainly enrich the performance that all of you experience tomorrow on Sunday. And it will be live streamed, so people you don't know, or I mean people who are not able to come, who are remote, if you go to our website, eugeneconcertchoir.org, you can give them, show them the link to be able to view this concert. I hope, the ripples will continue to spread. So, did you want?
No, just thanking you.
Yeah, thank you. So we have a performance to do, and we have to continue to be prepared here. And so I thank you all for coming, and please express your appreciation to me.